I got a really kind comment the other day, and along with the comment, there was a question. And with this video, I'm answering that question. So the comment was, you have a lot of charisma on camera, you have great camera presence. Have you ever considered creating a course on charisma and camera presence? And if you're the person who asked this question, please tag yourself down below in the comments. I would love to add you to the description. I just don't remember who asked me this question. Now, I actually did create a course on camera presence, on creating short form video to help market your business. And this is in 2022 when short form video was really taking off. So I was going through a big burnout at that time in my business, and I actually shut that program down. But I'm putting all of that content here on YouTube now. So if you decide you want to follow, and you're on a personal branding and YouTube or content creation journey, then go ahead and subscribe. In today's video, I want to talk about the 5 techniques that I personally use and from my experience have found that actually make it so much easier to speak to camera and come off natural, like we're having a conversation, and give you also one extra bonus tip. It's not really a bonus. It's the most important tip. So stay around till the end if you want to hear that tip. First, let's start out with understanding why we actually feel awkward or embarrassed filming ourselves for content, being a talking head to camera. It's important to understand the reason why, because if you understand the reasons why, it's easier to overcome these little hangups that we have about showing up and just being ourselves on camera. It helps us to show up more authentically. Let's talk about being elder millennials and Gen X
You're watching MTV.
and coming up or growing up in a time where we were told that if we were having a conversation and there was nobody there, we would get accused of having conversations with our imaginary friends and looking crazy, even as children. We're conditioned to not be out here talking to inanimate objects. And if we are out here talking to inanimate objects, it's so easy for us to perceive people as judging us for being vain, for being crazy, for all of the things that we think people are judging us for. Growing up in that time period was really hard. And the amount of conditioning that we got around always considering what other people think, it really makes it difficult for us to do this, to hold a conversation with an inanimate object like a camera. Another big reason that it's really awkward or uncomfortable to speak to camera is because the way we perceive ourselves in our own minds, and even the way that we see ourselves as a reflection in the mirror, and the way that we think our voices sound in our minds, all of it is super different. And you know this if you've ever shot a video of yourself or had somebody shoot a video of you and then you watch that playback, it creates this embarrassment and this self-judgment. Even if we're not trying to judge ourselves, we're seeing somebody who doesn't even feel like it's us, especially if this is your first time showing up on camera and your first time hearing yourself talk on camera. It can be really, really jarring. Like, how can I make myself appear the way that I think I look most natural? And that has us just overthinking this process. So, unfortunately, that's part of it, right? I'm going to tell you a story to give you an example of how the generation coming up, Gen Alpha and Gen Z, but Gen Alpha is really a great example of this. Gen Alpha isn't being raised in the same way that you and I were raised. So, I was in Hawaii with my partner's niece and shooting a TikTok video together. And she doesn't have extensive amounts of experience speaking to camera, right? She was like 6 or 7 years old, but she got on that camera and she was a natural. So, if somebody out there is afraid to make a TikTok video, what advice would you give them?
Well, I would give them, you say in your mind, This is okay. It's a new thing, but I haven't tried it. I haven't tried it yet.
So good, Lou. Okay. Do you remember the thing that you told me about bravery the other day?
Yes.
Okay. So I asked Lilu, the question, how do you become brave?
And I said, fear is a cage with only one way out, to face your fears.
That's how you get out of the cage, just with bravery?
Yeah, with bravery and unlocking your fear. Just like unlocking the lock on the cage.
So good, Lou.
Thanks.
You know what I mean? She knew exactly what to say and how to sit and how to look into the camera. She loved it. And it was just like a little fun activity. It was incredible to see that she didn't have to try to come off as herself authentically on camera because all of the conditioning that we got growing up and our fear of judgment and criticism and looking crazy is really something that whether or not we're aware of it, it's there and it really shows up when we're trying to do this. The last reason we're probably thinking that we don't look natural on camera is because if you're not used to seeing your mannerisms, for instance, as I'm watching these videos back, I see that I really talk with my hands and it's like a repetitive motion too. It's not even like I have different motions for different things that I'm saying. That can get really annoying for me to watch. And I know it's just because it's a little bit of embarrassment around how much I actually move when I'm speaking to camera. So for you, if you're seeing mannerisms that you're not used to seeing of yourself, because you're not looking at you when you're having a conversation with another person, you're just trying to convey your point. Watching that playback can be jarring as well. So let's get into the techniques that are actually going to help you start looking more natural, feeling more natural, talking to camera. This is not actually one of the techniques, but the number one way that we're actually going to get better and more natural talking to camera is practice. You can learn all of the techniques and practice in the mirror all you want, but unless you are filming yourself and actually posting yourself, starting from when you're bad and letting yourself just progress along the journey, you're going to stay stagnant. You're not going to see that this skill is improving within you. So, whether you practice these tips or not, I hope that you come away with something that'll motivate you to give it a shot and just try, right? Like try to post even when it does feel awkward and try to film yourself even when it feels embarrassing to be talking to an inanimate object. Tip number one, when we know we look good, then it's much easier to understand that we are the vocal point of the video. And so this first tip isn't even about the way we are talking. It's the way that we're setting up this camera, okay? So what you wanna be doing is making sure that you are the focal point. You wanna light yourself from the front. You want lights coming and pointing at your face. You do not want to have overhead lighting. You don't want to have lighting that's blasting you from the side. You want to be the thing that people are looking at as they're watching your video. I say all this because in the program that I am the lead coach for, a lot of the time I see people shooting with light coming from behind them. Or another thing that I see is people forgetting to wipe off the camera lens. And what it does is it throws off the focus, right? Or it just makes the scene really flat where you are not separated from the background or where the blurriness is actually distracting. So you don't need a super high quality camera. You can get away with a camera that's HD or 1080p. But if you're not lit from the front, if you're not the focal point of the shot, it's going to be really hard to be somebody in your audience just trying to focus on you as a talking head. So that's my first technique. Just make sure you yourself are lit well. This doesn't need to be an expensive thing. Shoot in front of the window if that's all you've got is natural light. try not to be lighting yourself with overhead lighting. If you're finding that your eye contact looks weird when you watch your playback, if you're constantly like looking up to the right, looking up to the left, if you're constantly just avoiding the camera, then what might be happening is that you need a little bit more of a plan, but less of a script. Okay. So this might happen in two different instances. One instance when people are looking around the screen and not directly into the camera lens, it's usually because they're trying to wing it, go with the flow and talk off of the top of their heads, which is perfectly fine. But if you're looking off and it's distracting, then what you need to do is create a little bit of a plan of what you're going to say, and you're going to want to know your points. Here's a couple ways you can do this. If you're somebody who doesn't like to plan a script, you don't have to write out a whole script. Actually, I suggest that you write on little post-its and just like 1 to 5 words on the points that you want to make sure to hit in the video that you're creating. It takes just a quick glance to jog your memory about what the point was, what you want to say, instead of trying to read either a document or read off of a teleprompter. It allows you to have much more natural eye contact. So you'll notice that I'm actually looking away from the lens every now and again, and that's because when we talk to people in real life, we're not like staring into their eyes necessarily. Now, I do know that there's a lot of content out there saying people with ADHD have like a really intense stare. And I think I probably do when I'm in a conversation with a real human being, but I want my eye contact to feel natural to you as I'm speaking. So I'm letting myself look away and then come back to the camera lens every now and again. But I do know the point that I'm trying to make so that I'm not trying to make something up or figure out what I'm trying to say while I'm looking away from the lens. I do notice because I was working with a teleprompter 17 years ago. My tendency when I'm working with a teleprompter is to overcompensate for reading with raising my voice. So if you find that you sound stiff, if you're trying to work with a teleprompter, or if it like really makes you come off unnatural because you're trying to read the words, comprehend them, and say them in a natural way, then I would say just ditch the teleprompter, use post-it notes, make it really, really simple for yourself so that you're not actually trying to use a tool that's supposed to be making it easy, but it's really just overcomplicating the whole situation. So, the third technique that I use for having great camera presence is making sure that my body language comes off as natural. There's a few ways that you can do this. Number one is to make sure that you're actually in comfortable clothing. So, if you're in a shirt where if you start to get nervous, you start to see pit stains, don't wear that shirt. That's not the shirt that you should be wearing. You need to be wearing something that's either comfortable to sit or stand in. Make the situation as comfortable as possible. So, if you're somebody who thinks that they should be standing while filming because of the energy, make sure you're not somebody who sways back and forth when you're nervous, because that's definitely going to come off on camera. I would suggest sitting at first, then you're contending with less of your body, making involuntary movements as you're learning how to speak directly to camera. I often sit weird, but I think it actually looks natural when I'm sitting weird. My feet are in a crisscross position a lot of the time while I'm sitting in the chair, but it does give me some place to rest my arm. And I do want to say that this having something to hold, right? Whether it's your actual mic, a stuffed animal, a bottle of water, having something to do with your hands will definitely help, because instead of trying to figure out what to do with your hands,
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
it's like we want to give our hands something to do so they don't become a distraction. And if you're somebody who talks with your hands like me, then Please. It actually psychologically creates comfort for us to see somebody talking with their hands instead of like flailing or not knowing where I should put my hands. I like to hold my microphone. I know that I also had a comment on another video where somebody was saying that they were taught to always hide the mic. This is true. Working on film, the mics would always be hidden, just out of shot. There would often be a boom mic if we were doing a commercial, just out of shot. But in the world of social media, in the world of showing up on YouTube, it's okay if you're showing your mic. It's just another visual technique also for some people, especially if you're holding your mic in an interesting way. It's another reason for somebody to just keep on watching, wondering what you're doing, holding your mic with some tongs. Oh, and another point on body language, there's a sweet spot with the way that you sit, right? If I'm like too slouched like this, it's kind of boring to watch me. I don't know, there's not enough energy there. And if I sit up too straight, then it's also uncomfortable to watch me because then I appear too stiff, too serious, and it's just as awkward for you to watch me as it is for me to watch myself in playback. Find a really comfortable seated position so that you have the full range of motion with your upper body so you can use your body to help express your point. Technique number 4, I'm not trying to tell you to come off like a cheerleader. Nobody needs all that energy all of the time. In fact, there are some YouTube channels dedicated to the low whispers of yes, right? Like we want to be on a feeling journey while we're watching a YouTube video or while we're watching even a piece of short form video. And when I say that, I mean you want the energy of what you're saying to really come through. So we can all agree that listening to somebody with a monotonous voice can be really boring. I know that when I watch videos back of myself and I have no tonal inflection in my voice, it's hard for me to even edit those videos. I'm kind of trying to edit myself so that I'm making myself sound more exciting or inspiring through the edit instead of through what I had filmed. If you can feel into what you're actually saying. You know, when you're telling a friend a really great story and you get emotive with it, I want you to get into that state while you're talking to camera. If you're telling stories, tell your own stories. If you're practicing and you're not ready yet to tell your own stories, then read the story, see how it makes you feel, and then go from that point of emotion. What we're actually looking for in the connection with our viewers or as a viewer is we're looking for somebody who feels like we're in conversation with them. If you're trying to build your personal brand, then you don't want to be coming off as somebody who is just reading you instructions on how to replace your toilet seat. So add the emotion in. That doesn't mean like being super hype and being someone you're not. It means feel what you're saying as you're saying it. And that will create the inflections in your voice without you having to push or feel like you're doing something that really isn't you. It might feel a little bit uncomfortable at first because, like I said, we're talking to an inanimate object with a lot of voice inflection. That's going to feel really weird. But once you start getting on a roll with it and practicing, it starts feeling more and more normal. This 5th technique is to be more specific when you're speaking. It's hard for us as listeners, as viewers, to comprehend and stay interested in generalities when somebody is just speaking in really broad, vague terms and talking about really broad, vague topics without specific examples and specific stories. When we listen to somebody who's just skimming over the top, it's hard for us to want to continue following along. For this technique, you're going to want to find examples, specific examples related to the point that you're trying to make through the video. So, that story that I told about my partner's niece, that's to be able to give you something to think about in your imagination as I'm telling you the story. If I were to just give you each of these 5 techniques and tell you what the techniques are, but I didn't give you an example of how to use them, it'd be hard for you to continue watching this video because it's hard to have a takeaway with that, right? You would want me to help you understand what I'm talking about by giving you a specific example of something. A generality in this case would be like, make sure you have good body posture. And then moving on to the next technique. It's like, what's good body posture? Tell me specifically what good body posture is. And when I was saying, you don't want to be too slouched and you don't want to be seated up too straight. You want to be comfortable. You want to be able to have control of at least the top half of your body. That is a specific example that you can visualize yourself doing. Speak in specificities, right? It's going to help the person watching you really grab on to what you're saying. It's also going to help them ask questions if they have them or comment on what you've said because they have something to tie that comment or that question back to. Now we're on to our bonus tip. If you stuck around for this part of the video, thanks and congrats to you because if you only apply this one technique, you will see yourself improving immediately once you start practicing this one thing. Remember the beginning when we were talking about how speaking to an inanimate object is something that makes us already feel unnatural and kind of cringy and embarrassed as Gen X, as millennials? What you can do is keep in mind that your viewer is actually just one person. The majority of the time, there's not a watch party going on where there's a bunch of people sitting down together to watch your YouTube video. So, really, when you're doing a talking head, you're addressing one person. You're trying to have that person, your viewer, feel like they're in conversation with you. So, how would you do this? I want you to think about somebody who you're very, very comfortable talking to. Okay. It could be your best friend, it could be your favorite client, it could be your aunt, it could be your cousin. It could be whoever you just feel really, really comfortable having a conversation, exchanging stories with. Now, if you have that person in your mind, okay, this might help somebody who, if you don't have the ability to like picture someone in your mind, I want you to print out their picture. Or to make it easy, if you don't have a printer, if you don't have a physical picture of them, if you're using your phone to film, I want you to write their name on a Post-it note and stick it to your camera or stick it somewhere close to your camera. I want you to think of this person and I want you to have the entire conversation that you're having with your camera, but I want you to picture that you are actually talking to this one person. This will change your energy around how you're actually speaking. It starts to make a real difference with the very first time you try it. It's going to get easier and better if you try it and practice it more often. But every single video that I make, I actually have somebody in my mind who I'm speaking to. So a lot of the time, if I'm answering a question, I'm actually talking to that person who asked that question. And that person is in my mind so that the conversation has a point. That person feels like they're receiving information in a way that is understandable, that's succinct in a way that they are wanting to really understand the point. Because in a conversation, if I'm always just trailing off and I'm not landing anywhere, it's really hard to follow, especially if I'm doing it on camera. So if I'm thinking of a person and I either have their picture sitting on my camera, if I have their picture in my mind's eye and I'm holding this conversation with them, then there's this added layer to this conversation instead of me just thinking that what I'm talking to is a little circle behind some glass on my camera. The point that I was making before, people are not generally watching you in a group of people. I know there's a lot of YouTubers who say, hey, you guys, or hey, you all. And it's like we're speaking to a crowd. This is something that can psychologically help you to know that you're actually only talking to one person at a time. And your viewer, if they feel like they're the only one that you're speaking to, it creates a more instant connection so that this conversation does feel genuine and it doesn't feel like you're trying to deliver information to a crowd and then the viewer doesn't feel like they're just one of a crowd. So, if you just use one of these techniques, use the bonus one and watch your videos improve. Okay. I have been working in media for a long time in front of and behind the camera. Even though I'm a new YouTuber, I am used to this on camera vibe. So don't compare your day one to somebody's day 975, whatever it might be. And my best advice to you is just practice and don't practice in the mirror, practice to camera and post it. Let yourself know that that feeling of cringiness, of embarrassment, of awkwardness it's safe for you to feel. Yes, there are people on the internet who will leave mean comments. It's something that I actually have anxiety about too when I see people commenting things that are mean or rude, and they will. But allow yourself to practice in front of people. And if you see those mean or rude comments, just delete them. Just delete them. It's not worth the headache. It's not worth the boost in the algorithm if it's something that you're going to think about and let it stop you from moving forward on this journey to build your personal brand and to get good speaking to camera. I hope these techniques were really helpful to you. If you have any other techniques that you use, please share them in the comments below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.